Hi, David.
Hi, Fred.
Good to see you. I feel so proud of the work that you do. So I want our audience to find out what makes you such a wonderful inspiration and trainer of young people. So I'm sure some of that is to do with your own training. So perhaps you could start with how you grew up, what inspired you to become a musician. What are the things that you pass on that were given to you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to see you again. Yeah, my training was very informal until I was about 18. So I started music lessons when I was about 3. I'm known to have been able to sing solfege syllables before I could be able to speak. And then I started piano lessons, and I used to sort of have this ability to improvise a little bit of childlike songs here and there, and I composed a little bit, but eventually I wandered around as I became a teenager. So I learned how to play the guitar, the electric guitar, joined a punk band. That didn't go too well. My mother didn't like the name of the band because she thought it was too dark. The name was Collective Suicide.
Oh, right.
Bit dark.
Yes.
And it was very dark. And eventually I started realizing that I like, Chopin etudes more than punk music, or at least equally. And so I started practicing again and taking lessons until I auditioned to join the Simón Bolívar Conservatory in Caracas. And I decided to pursue a musical path, first as a piano performer, always sort of composing on the side. And eventually I became really, really interested in music theory. So I ended up in Montreal. I went to McGill University, and there I pursued a music major in music theory as well as piano concentration. I really liked to trying to understand how music's put together and how it works and how every element functions. And I'm a big addict when it comes to the study of harmony, especially in a functional way when we're talking about tonal music, how the chords express what they express, why sometimes a certain progression can steer all of these emotions. And I tend to gravitate to music that has very strong interest in harmonic processes in it. Anyway, so conducting was never in my radar. I grew up going to lots of symphonic concerts. As I said, I grew up in Caracas, and there were when I was growing up, there used to be about 5 professional orchestral concerts per week. So there was an orchestra performing Thursdays, one on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I usually would go to 2 or 3 of those. So I loved orchestral repertoire, but I always hated conductors. I thought they looked silly. I thought they were a distraction from the music. I was just
keep going.
Yeah, Brett likes this very much.
The list is much longer.
I just thought I used to close my eyes or sort of try to cover my field of vision so I didn't get distracted by the conductor's silly tails flapping around. Anyway. Eventually, I was already in Montreal, and I started becoming even more interested in orchestral repertoire and attending rehearsals. And I'll never forget, there was a search for the music director of the McGill orchestral program, and one of the candidates who didn't get the job was conducting Brahms' Second Symphony. I've always been a fan of Brahms since I'm 8. And I played the first waltz by Brahms. I don't know if you know it, from Opus 39. And I remember I was there, and the choral conductor, I was singing in the choir, was a few seats to my left, and he was part of the search committee, and I said, Professor Edwards, he was a guy from from Wales, by the way. And then Professor Edwards, how does one become a conductor? And he's like, come to my office tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Oh no, the training will begin.
And anyway, like my only interest was like, I was so jealous of my peers. I was taking all of these classes with them, playing chamber music with them, and they were playing this beautiful Brahms symphony. I just wanted to be a part of it. And I realized that it was too late for me to pick up an orchestral instrument. Little by little, I started working more and more with students and youth ensembles and having to develop a different set of skills that allows me to teach and train an orchestra, which is different from conducting, as you know, professional groups. So it's not that much about conducting all the time, but it's about leading and about inspiring and about taking the group to the next level. I always like to describe what a conductor does that way. We take an orchestra, we have to take it from point A to Z, whatever that may be for that given group. So if you start working with a professional union orchestra and you have 3 rehearsals, you have to take them from the chaotic reading session to a beautiful, well-shaped concert, and that's only 3 days. With a youth orchestra, you have a much longer process, and you have to just try to make them give their all and play the best they can. They will never sound like the professional orchestra who only has 3 rehearsals, even if they have 20, but they will hopefully learn a lot and sound the best they can be.
So what are you doing now when you can't even congregate?
Well, it's been very hard for the Pasadena Youth Symphony Orchestra, the Philharmonic, which is the group I conduct, is the most advanced. We created a series of activities and projects for the students to learn about orchestral playing, but that don't involve rehearsing in a common space for obvious reasons. So some of them I took advantage, for example, of the fact that the Berlin Philharmonic made their whole what they call the digital concert hall available for free for up to a month. You can get a subscription, and so I made students watch a concert of the Schumann First Symphony, which we were about to perform. We were getting ready to perform. So they watched this beautiful, beautiful concert conducted by Samuel Rattle, and I created a series of questions to sort of guide their listening and look at how the players actually make sound, how the attacks are. In the case of string players, how they're using the bow, how the bow distribution is, how they use the vibrato and when, so on. So they are really critically watching a top ensemble play repertoire that is right, down their alley. So that's one of the activities. We also worked on creating video excerpts. So, right, like a lot of, auditions, for instance, this summer and possibly in the fall are going to be done remotely, and students are going to have to create videos. So we made them create video of orchestral excerpts, and the sectional coaches and I provided feedback, not only about how to play a given excerpt in terms of musicianship and style and technique, but also, hey, you should, the angle is not right, you need to work on the light. So they could learn how to produce a great video audition recording that they can use in the future, not only right now, but in the near future. And the response was extremely positive. I think students did a lot of great work. They were really into it. They appreciate this, our desire to keep the community going, even if it was not in the circumstances that they had originally envisioned, meaning a rehearsal and concerts.
So David, it's a good time, it seems, for the students to kind of do a deep dive into form and harmony and some of the mechanics of the music they're normally playing, or maybe too busy to actually analyze. Is that also what you're doing? We
did dig a little bit into historical aspects of the repertoire by studying Eroica and its composition and the relationship with Beethoven's life at the time, and a little bit how the pieces together and what's unprecedented about Beethoven's writing. at that time.
Everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Just a 20-minute movement with a 12-minute development. Yeah.
So I want to know for both of you, because occasionally I get a student who wants to conduct, and that's like the one area I'm like, what are you supposed to tell a student that says I would like to conduct?
Go
David?
ahead, David.
Good luck. That's all I'm saying. Good luck. Let's get back.
Well, I'm very old school, and I think I'm old school, but I think I'm changing. I'm becoming more of a softie. For a long time, I was like, you first become a consummated musician in whatever instrument you're playing, and then you gotta study everything about music theory, composition, and history, and then we'll talk. So I always was of the
So I'll see you in 20 years.
well, I was always of the mind that conducting is a graduate type of study. It's not really pre-college or even college. So I have college students at the Claremont colleges who approach me, oh, can I take conducting? Well, have you taken all the theory sequences? What elective have you taken? What's your history? What can you read? Play the, so I was very sort of tough and old-fashioned. But lately I have had younger students approach me, and I have found it hard to resist when I see their enthusiasm. So what I do, I teach them theory and form too, and score reading. I always start with that. The transposing instruments are clef and musicianship and a little bit of ear training, and then we start with a basic formal analysis, and parallel to that we start with some gestures. But if the gestures are not backed up by they should be the tip of the iceberg of the conductor's knowledge. In fact, there have been so many fantastic conductors with sort of dubious body language, and the other way around. So many incredible musicians, or not so incredible musicians, with beautiful gesture, but that they tend to be sort of empty, an empty facade. So I would rather my students being the former, the great musicians with a not so good gesture than the other way around. So, but it's once again it's a balance act. How about you, David? What's your take?
I'm probably even more of a softie than you've turned into. I think that well, I remember the experience that I had when I first conducted, where I sort of was able to get through the score and conduct this small ensemble, but I didn't know how to listen. I didn't know how to synthesize what I was hearing and sift through in any kind of organized way what and how I should improve. So of course it's important to understand the music and to have keyboard skills, and oftentimes if you're not a string player, it's difficult to draw naturally a sound out of the strings. So I often encourage people to learn to play an instrument, even at a rudimentary level. But I also encourage people to start waving their arms around and put together, a string quartet, just to their friends. I mean, somebody in the youth orchestra can get together a small ensemble, even an arrangement of a piece that's familiar. It almost doesn't matter how short or long it is, but if that person starts to create a connection with a sound that matches to their movement, so that they find they can actually influence the sound that's coming out of the small ensemble, then I think it's another sort of spur to keep going into all of the background that you and I obviously both think is really critical for becoming a conductor.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and then that's why lately have been taking younger students too and try to start teaching them, and then perhaps influenced by my experience of teaching conducting in Venezuela. So in Venezuela, there are so many ensembles. There are many more, or at least there used to be. Things have been changing lately, but there are more ensembles that are formally trained conductors, for sure. So very often, a youth orchestra under the umbrella of El Sistema will ask somebody who is just an advanced student, hey, you gotta conduct this rehearsal right now, go. Like, they have been playing in the orchestra for a few years, maybe they're a very talented violinist or flutist or a horn player or viola player, and then they just have to conduct. And that advanced student may be 15 or 16. And then before they know it, they're conducting a Mahler symphony. Mm-hmm. And they develop a beautiful, most of the time, a beautiful fluency of gestures. It comes so natural to them. And it's beautiful to watch. So when I go to Venezuela, I often try to teach theory workshops. Because I think like the students are, sometimes honestly I like their gestures better than mine, but I think like they would benefit so much from getting the other way around. So here I'm approaching it the opposite way. So I'll teach you theory right away, but let's get you moving so you can develop some of that fluency that young conductors in Venezuela inherently have.
It's a very interesting point. I've seen a lot of conductors become assistants with very fine major orchestras, and they can make too many assumptions about what's coming out of the orchestra in front of them in relation to what they're doing. Meaning that the orchestra is kind of doing it by themselves most of the time. And so there's a false sense of security that you're actually inspiring this great orchestra. And I think it's critical that younger conductors get to work with, say, a youth orchestra, not a good ensemble, because they've got to actually discern what has to be improved and make judgments of tone and pitch and line and balance that with a great orchestra you need to do.
I actually agree with you 110%. And I have to say, I don't think, even though I am very inspired by the training I received at Northwestern, I don't think I really learned how to conduct there. I mean, I learned many aspects of conducting there, but I really started to become a better conductor when I started working with much less advanced ensembles than the ones at Northwestern, because those ensembles, they pretty much sounded like a good regional orchestra, to be honest, because the level was so high. But when I started working with students who sometimes were not music majors, and I still do that in Claremont, then it's very easy to know that this doesn't sound like the Boston Symphony or the Berlin Philharmonic, but it's not easy to know how to teach the orchestra to get better and take it apart and little by little build a better ensemble.
So when you're working with the kids, how do you let off steam when you come to a certain place in the process, and perhaps people haven't been practicing quite enough, or you feel like you've been pushing too hard in a particular direction? I mean, what's the strategy for sort of mixing it up with young people over a long process?
Yeah, well, I think my personal main strategy is a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I think I have this sort of stand-up comedic personas on the podium. So the more frustrated I am, the more intense those comedians are. So I'm never really angry, because I have come to realize that after a while, if a conductor has the right intentions in mind, people respect that. If you have the musicianship and you just really want them to sound good, it's not about me, it's about them. I want to learn, I want to sound the best they can. I think students take that seriously. So I try not to get frustrated ever or with the students, but perhaps it's about the music itself. So there are several things I do, and as I said before, I think a sense of humor is very important. I use sarcasm. I play these characters. I hit my head, so like, oh my God, not again! It's staccato, or like, I can't believe it. You're gonna give me a heart attack, But everybody knows I'm joking. So the students are actually grinning, and I'm pretending, and I'm really upset. This is going to cost me years of therapy. I can't believe I missed that cue again. Of course it's not. So,
You've already been through the years of therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I have many other reasons to do therapy.
You don't want to go back.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think humor is a very important thing. And something I learned from a former mentor is that when you are giving criticism, and it's you're saying something about that needs to be fixed, you don't criticize the person ever. You just criticize the object, which is the music. You say, this is being played, so you use the passive voice very often. This shouldn't be played like this. So I always make sure that students understand that I respect them deeply as a person. Even if as musicians, they're in a process of development, and I need to critique them so they become better. So it's that balancing of offering critique, but always letting them know one way or another that you respect the person profoundly and that it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, David, it's just been a great pleasure talking to you, and I want to thank you again for your amazing work with the young people.
Thanks, David. It's been nice to meet you and talk to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you, David, for having me, and it's the pleasure is all mine.
Up next, we have part 2 to our PYSO interview with 3 seniors from the Philharmonic. We'll discuss how they're adapting to the new normal and their future plans after PYSO. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, let's do this. Okay, where shall we start? Why don't you tell us about the PYSO orchestra?
So the PYSO, the Pasadena Youth Symphony Orchestra, is a program that consists of 6 different ensembles. We have the Philharmonic and the Symphony. Those are 2 symphony orchestras. But we also have the string orchestra, the wind ensemble, the prelude strings, and the all-city orchestra. And today we have 3 students from the PYSO Philharmonic, which is the most advanced symphony orchestra.
Ta-da! Drum roll, please. Okay, so Patill, why don't we start with you? Tell us about your instrument, how long you've played in the orchestra, and yeah.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Saren Daghlian. I play the flute, and I've been playing for about 10 years now. And I've been playing in PYSO for 6 years, so a majority of that time's been in PYSO. I've been in the wind ensemble, symphony, and Phil, so I've gotten kind of a wide range of experiences, and I've had a really great experience in all 3 of the ensembles. I mean, it's really developed me as a musician because it not only motivated me to work with other musicians who maybe didn't come from the same background that I came from, but also it just helped me become a better person. Just working with other people. Yeah, and my plans for the future is to go to Caltech and study physics. Yeah.
Fantastic. Elise, what about you?
All right, so I play the oboe, and I've been playing for about 9 years. So I started in 4th grade, and then I joined PYSO in 9th grade. And I was in symphony for a year, and then I did Phil for the remaining 3 years. And the way that it impacted me was that it deepened my appreciation for ensemble music and for classical music, because before I didn't get a chance to listen to a lot of that type of music. It gave me access to different artists that I've never really been able to find before, and it also helped me appreciate just that special moment when everyone's playing together and it all works together and you realize that you're a part of something bigger than yourself.
Well said. And where are you going next year for college?
I'm going to be going to UC Santa Barbara, and I'll be studying financial mathematics and statistics as a major.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Rock stars here, all of you. Okay, Saren, what about you?
Yeah, also I've been playing the violin for almost 10 years now. I've been in PYSO for 6 years. My first year was string ensemble. There actually wasn't prelude strings when I started, so I started in string orchestra, and then afterwards I did symphony for 2 years, and then I did fiddle for 3. It's been really fun in PYSO because like it's kind of like with solo music you have a lot of freedom. With ensemble music, you kind of have that like solo experience, like you're playing solo music with like a number of other people. It's like it's intimate, but like it's basically like solo music. And then with orchestra, it's kind of like you kind of almost have to put that soloistic side of you away. You have to almost like conform to the rest of the sound of the orchestra, be able to listen better, be able to watch the conductor, be able to communicate with others in your section. There's a lot that you have to put in. So I feel like that experience really helped me, and also being able to like come with like sometimes you have to sight read the music on the spot if it's like the first rehearsal or something, and you also have to be able to practice the music, get everything ready, and be like set like since there's a high expectation in orchestra, you have to like meet that expectation. And this year I'll be going to Caltech to study biology.
Fantastic. David, do you want to say something about watching the conductor?
Yeah, you guys have to remember only to watch the conductor or doing something that makes sense. And then a very important orchestra musician skill is also learning how to ignore the conductor and when. Would you agree with that, Brett?
Yes. Yeah. More of the ignore. No, I'm joking.
I also have to say, Saren, you've been the first and last soloist that participated with the PYSO Philharmonic. So before this pandemic started, we had a concert in, when was it? March?
December.
Oh, December, sorry.
Yeah.
For an ensemble. In December, and then we had some sort of concerto competition, and Saren was the winner. He played the first movement of the Cacciatorian violin concerto with us.
Oh, nice.
So how was that experience compared to being a part of the orchestra, and how is it different to be a soloist compared to playing with a pianist? Being a soloist with an orchestra, I imagine, is a totally different experience.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of like advantages and disadvantages to both. I feel like with piano you have a lot more freedom since it's just one person following you, and like the pianist is just following. So like it's a little easier to communicate with them on the spot, and like if you have to like slow down somewhere that you hadn't before, then it's much easier to just do it right on the spot. But I feel like with orchestra it's a lot more exhilarating to play with orchestra. It's just like it's so amazing, like having like a group of like 80 some people playing with you. It's like really, really exhilarating. You have to, I think in that situation, you have to learn how to follow. You have to kind of, it's more like ensemble playing where you're also more attentive to the rest of the orchestra and how they're playing instead of just playing however you'd usually play. I feel like when I would play with piano, it's much easier to just do what I wanted to do, especially with different speeds. Like if I wanted to try something new, it wasn't too difficult. I feel like with orchestra, I had to be much more deliberate with what I wanted to do with each passage, and like bring it to you and get your suggestions, and then have to play with the orchestra like that.
Yeah, I have to say you did a great job, but it often with young soloists is really hard because they are, as you say, used to playing with one person accompanying on the piano, and then that person is very nimble. Orchestras are much more complex, and so soloists have to learn how to sort of be, as you say, deliberate, but also be logical in a way that many musicians can sort of tell when you're going to slow down, where you're going to take time, where you're going to breathe. So you have to be very musically intelligent in that sense and be able to compromise and still be yourself. I think it's a beautiful thing, but it's a different type of solo playing, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Saren, how did you practice working on the different kinds of sound you need? Because playing with the piano is obviously a different kind of sound than you need with an entire orchestra behind you.
Yeah, so like when I was playing with the piano, like I would have like I wouldn't have to project as much. So like when I started playing with when I started rehearsing with the orchestra, I started practicing on my own, like how I'd project. Like I'd play scales with like more projection. I'd try to like not sacrifice sound quality or like phrasing, but still like having that like louder like volume so I can actually project above the orchestra. And that was kind of a challenge because I was so used to playing it a certain way. Like I played this concerto like on and off for about 2.5 years. So just it was like I had like this set interpretation in my mind, and I had to like kind of almost scratch most of that out, and then like restart like doing different stuff. Where should I hold my bow? Should it be close to the bridge? Like how do I have to articulate these passages so that it will project better? And I feel like that was one of the things. I also studied the score a lot more. I hadn't looked at the score. I'd looked at the piano score, but it's really, really different from the orchestra score. There are a lot of stuff that the piano doesn't play that the orchestra does, and you have to like look out for those stuff. So I would listen to recordings with like the score in front of me, so that I know exactly what's happening, and that really prepared me for the performance.
Fantastic.
And Elise and Patill, you've been sort of soloist with the orchestra too, because you've been principal oboist and principal flutist, so you had the opportunity to sometimes sort of have a spotlight on you and then be accompanied with the orchestra. Are there any memorable moments or solos that come to mind in your career with PYSO?
I can think of a few. Like there is one that I particularly really enjoyed playing was in Dvorak's 8th Symphony. It was in the 4th movement, and I think one of the things we worked on a lot was projection, because like the flute's not, out of like all the orchestral instruments, it's not one of the most projected instruments out there. So it was very interesting to be like, I need to play like this really fast passage, but I also have to make sure I project and stay with the conductor. So it was all these things that needed to come together. Yeah, it was a really cool experience that PYSO gave all of us, just to be able to play with an entire orchestra. Yeah.
How about you? You play English horn in that concert with the Dvorak 8th. I remember. Was that your first time playing English horn, Elise?
So when I first joined, we did Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet Overture, and there's a really
that's true.
Important English horn solo. So for that concert, I rented an English horn and I played that solo. But there was also 2 English horn solos in the Khachaturian concerto that Saren played. So those 2 were really fun, just because it was a different instrument. So I had like 2. I had to bring them on stage. That was a bit nerve-wracking, having 2 instruments in the back.
Okay, so you're all going off to college, non-music majors, but how is music going to stay in your lives? Saren, you want to go first?
Okay. I actually haven't, like, I also auditioned for some music programs, so I was kind of deciding between the 2, like, should I do music or should I do biology? And then I chose biology as my bachelor's, to get a bachelor's degree in biology, but I really don't know what I'm going to do afterwards. I'm still continuing lessons with my teacher at USC, so I think that'll still be so like I can kind of like keep up. But if I change my mind later and I want to do music again, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Patill?
So yeah, I'm like definitely thinking about doing like being part of the Caltech orchestra while I'm there, and also maybe being part of like their joint program with Occidental. I also play the piano, so I want to make sure like I can maintain like both instruments, because I don't know, I've put in like a lot of work over the years, and I really like playing music, like really transforms you and like takes you somewhere else, and I guess gives you another interpretation to even the non-related music stuff that you do. So I think it's definitely something I want to continue.
And Elise?
So I've actually been playing at my church on like Sundays, so I've already been doing like other performances beyond like youth orchestras, And my hope is to like figure out how to keep doing that as I go into college, and then also trying to join their ensembles there and possibly get lessons from their oboe teacher.
Great. Yeah, it's just all about managing time, but if music's important, you'll find the time.
I would be curious to know how you've been doing and your families are doing in the past few weeks. I mean, this has been a great crisis, and also you've been able to continue making music, even if it's on your own or remotely with other people. But just how have the past couple of months been?
I can start. Okay, I'll start. I started working on the Beethoven Violin Concerto at the beginning of quarantine, so I'm kind of just chugging away at that. I tried rehearsing with my quartet on Zoom. It was a disaster, so we kind of gave up on that. But we do speak from time to time still, like over Zoom. But as of now, our quartet rehearsals are paused. So, but hopefully I should be able. I'm trying to like finish most of the Beethoven Violin Concerto by the time quarantine's over. So that's kind of my goal.
Great.
Fantastic. You might need, well, a lot of people would need multiple quarantines for that piece.
Yeah, I mean, I'm nowhere near finished. I mean, it's not just learning the notes. It's also like
Of course, I'm teasing you.
Yeah.
I think it's great. That's an amazing project.
Mm-hmm. Patill?
Yeah. Our music school actually had like a few online music recitals, so like everybody would be on Zoom, and then whenever it was your turn, you would just like turn on your camera and your sound and everything. So I played the one of the Mozart flute concertos with a piano track in the background. It was pretty interesting. I needed to like practice with it a couple of times, and we had to like time the like there was a mini cadenza, so I had to time that and make sure I came back with the piano. Thought was my tech support key, like pressed the play button and everything. So yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I also like printed a few like flute parts off IMSLP for orchestra. So like a few pieces that I like symphonies I had heard over the years that I really wanted to like play along with. I just like practiced the part and played along with the recording. So yeah, just trying to keep it up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I've kept up with my lessons through this quarantine, so I've been doing my lessons over Zoom. I've been definitely trying to work on like more technical stuff since I don't have performance pieces. I did have to prepare for an audition video because I was applying for a scholarship. And then I was doing some score reading of like symphonies that I like. They're mostly like Tchaikovsky symphonies, but like I was downloading the scores from IMSLP and just listening to the music and reading through, and like it was cool looking through, finding other parts that I had never heard before. So that's the stuff I've been doing.
I think it's a great use, all of you, it's a great use of your time.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. Very inspiring.
Absolutely. And I would like to say that it's been inspiring having you past few years with the Philharmonic, and thank you for joining us today and sharing with you about your past, present, and future connection with music.
All right, well, thanks everyone so much. It was great chatting with you. Good luck. You're also talented. It's really inspiring, so thanks for doing this. So let's hear an excerpt now from the December concert of the PYSO Philharmonic.